you don't know what you didn't know. And everything that's living in your head, we've got to get out of there. And I've seen too where those business owners are making a lot of assumptions and they think their team should know how to answer that email from a client or how to respond to that question about a receipt or whatever the situation may be. And they don't. And it's not because they're not qualified or because they're not a great team member. Just you have your own way of doing things. And we need to get that out of your head and document it and then supported by a proper project management tool so that your team can successfully support you.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great one. Our guest is the owner of a project management and operations consultancy called Agency Authority. She uses her 10 years of agency experience to help business owners maximize their team, increase their productivity, and grow their profits. Melissa Morris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thanks so much for having me on.
It's great to have you. Melissa, I'm looking forward to getting into project management and operations conversations. But before we do all of that, please let us know a little about you and your career journey leading up to this point.
Yeah. So I spent 10 years working in ad agencies. I got my bachelor's in advertising and spent a decade working in the agency life. In that space, I was the account executive, but I was also at a boutique agency. So I was wearing a lot of hats, which often happens in agency life. So I spent a lot of time managing deadlines, budgets, clients, team, all the things, right? And then I decided that I was ready to go out on my own. And I left the agency. This was 2016. So I left the agency I'd been working at, and I decided I was going to go do marketing consulting and serve some clients in the community. I got them on board, and I realized, why don't I like this as much as I liked working in the agency? And what I realized my favorite part about my role in the agency was the project management component. I spent a lot of time, as I said, managing deadlines, budgets, heavy project management work. And I just really missed that. And so I started working with the business owners that had looked to me for marketing consulting, and I started helping them with some other things, their own project management tools, their own workflows, their own big business backend. I found managing capacity, managing client deliverables, keeping projects within scope and on timeline was a real struggle for a lot of the business owners I worked with. And that was something I was really good at. So I started helping them with that. And then over the years, it has grown, and now Agency Authority is here, and we help service providers, agencies, firms serve their clients in a bigger, better way. And, as you said, maximize their team and increase efficiency. So ultimately, we're increasing revenue and profits.
Very cool. Very cool. And why do you think project management is your thing?
I think it's a few things. With all of us, we have our zone of genius. I think just my personality, I don't know if you're familiar with the Colby, but it's a test that measures how you act, like your first impulse when you're presented with a new problem or challenge or situation. I'm high on fact finder. I'm high on follow through. Those two both speak to project management, efficiencies, operations. So I think some of it's just kind of built in to how I work. And then, of course, all the experience I had working at this boutique agency and other various agencies. When you have to wear a lot of hats, you pick up a lot of tricks. I had some really great mentors along the way. And I think it all just culminated. And I've just really found a business that I love. And I love the work that we do for our clients.
That's very cool. It's always interesting to hear the journey and how there's things you can do, but then there's also things that you really like to do. And when those two things can come together and you can be great at something you love, that's awesome.
For sure. It's always you get in a situation where everybody's winning. You, your team, your clients.
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious, along the way, you've grown your business, our audience, our bookkeeping business owners, always interested to know the big obstacles you hit while growing your business.
Yeah, so I've worked with a number of bookkeepers and CFOs and financial consultants over the years, and they are so deadline driven. And the tricky part when you're building a firm such as that is everybody has the same deadlines. Like when you have a website company, you can space out when the websites are going to launch. Or if you're branding and design or you're a PR firm, you can balance that out a little bit. But what I found is with my bookkeepers, payroll day is payroll day. The 1st and the 15th or the 1st and the 15th. Quarterly taxes are all due, right? Taxes are all due. So these things are very predetermined, and there's not a whole lot that bookkeepers can do in terms of when the deadlines are. So I've worked with them and, we've tried to implement ways to streamline where we can and make efficiencies where we can. But that's definitely a challenge for bookkeepers and really all agencies, is that managing capacity, managing workflow, making sure you have a nice, easy pace and not everything's happening all at once. That's often a big struggle, and it can lead to a lot of overwhelm and burnout for business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. We hear it all the time. We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. Do you ever feel overwhelmed with your bookkeeping business? Are there just too many things swirling around in your head without a way to organize them all? Introducing Pure Workflow. It's a simple, easy-to-use workflow practice management solution which will help you manage your clients, deadlines, workflow, and team with ease. Forget about all the struggling to keep everything organized. With Pure Workflow, you can focus on what's really important, your clients. Its client management software gives you one central place to manage all of your client relationships and communications. Plus, Pure Workflow has a flexible reporting ability that will allow you to manage your team and monitor productivity and business results. It offers everything you need to hit your deadlines, manage your to-dos, and stay in control. Unlike other workflow softwares in the bookkeeping industry, Pure Workflow is built exclusively for bookkeeping firms and comes complete with all the templates, training, and documentation for best practice bookkeeping, so you can run your business like a world-class firm. So get your precious time back, reduce overwhelm, and get organized with Pure Workflow. Check out pureworkflow.com for more information. That's pureworkflow.com. Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview. When you are thinking about overwhelm and burnout, and you've had some, as you've mentioned, what is it that's leading them into making them, and how can they prevent that? What have you seen that's been working?
Yeah, so there are a few things that can be done to prevent burnout. And there's also some things I've seen people do in order to deal with their burnout that is not effective, and they think it is. So I think there are two things that we can talk about there. So I think when someone's in overwhelm and burnout, I tend to see a few things happen. I see this tendency to work more. They think, if I just keep working more, then I'll eventually get ahead. And as anybody who has been in overwhelm or burnout will attest, that does not happen. It doesn't happen that way. Often just working more is not the solution. I've also seen business owners go from one extreme to the other. They'll get very, very hands-on, and they're getting copied on emails. They're meeting with their team a lot. They're just getting very down in the nitty-gritty on every little detail. And that's because they feel a little out of control. That overwhelm has them feeling like they're not really sure what's going on, that, business and projects are kind of slipping through their fingers and they don't have a good handle on it. So they dig in deeper. Or I've seen the opposite, where they're kind of throwing their hands up, they're waving the white flag and saying, you guys go and run with it. And what can happen is they're leaving a team to tend to tasks when they have not been properly trained. There are no standards in place. There's no SOPs. There's no clear workflow. And then things are happening with projects that the business owner doesn't know anything about. And then it all kind of, hits the proverbial fan, and the business owner's looking around thinking, oh my gosh, what has happened? And then the last thing I see when business owners are in burnout and overwhelm, one of the other mistakes I see them make is they start to haphazardly use tools. So this can look like they're starting to jump into Slack because they think, oh, if I can just get out of email, that'll be better, right? So I'm going to introduce Slack. Well, now you just have two places where you're getting bombarded with messages. Or I've seen them bounce from project management tool to project management tool. They're in Asana, and then they get frustrated because now they're just getting lots of notifications from Asana. So then they go into ClickUp, and then they can't figure out ClickUp. And then there's just tasks everywhere and to-dos everywhere. So I would definitely caution people, if you're experiencing burnout or you think you're in that way, headed that way, the answer is not work more. We don't want to pick an extreme on super hands-on or super hands-off with our team. And we want to be thoughtful about the tools that we are using.
So true. It can be a real clutter, and often using a new tool sounds really attractive, but it's always such a large amount of work to do a migration or a switch, and that benefit never comes until you've fully done the migration correctly and made the right decision. And it might not be the right decision, so that can be just a complete waste of time and energies.
You're exactly right. And the other thing that I see is, even when a business owner is successfully taking a path to get into a tool, and maybe they've been watching tutorials on the tool and they're like really committed to it, you have to be careful too, because the first step is always to take a look at your workflows, because you need to have a clearly defined and efficient workflow. And then the tool is going to come in and support that workflow. So a common mistake I see when someone is setting up a project management tool, it really just turns into an online to-do list. It's really just a long, long list of tasks. There's no organization to it. There's no buckets that we can put those tasks in, and it really doesn't do them any good. They still find that they're feeling really frustrated. They can't manage capacity. They don't know where their deadlines are. And then they end up abandoning the project management tool. And that's not the answer either.
So true. I was actually having a conversation this very morning about the checklist manifesto. It's like the example was an airplane. So a pilot's got an airplane and they go through a checklist. So it's like, turn on the switch, do this, do that. But the checklist is only just a small, it's like you couldn't just give somebody that checklist and expect them to fly the plane. They would fail miserably. There's manuals, there's standard operating procedures, there's training that's been done. It's all thought out correctly in order to make sure that that pilot is fully trained, ready to go, has no problem. And the checklist is just there to guide them through the process to make sure that they get it right every single time. And if it's not done that way, just a checklist or just a workflow management solution isn't going to solve the problem in a way that's going to be efficient and effective and lead to the desired outcome, which is more freedom and ability to do better work.
Yeah, and that is a brilliant analogy. That's exactly right. You can't give somebody this little piece of the puzzle and think all the years of experience and all the knowledge and all the other good stuff behind it is going to translate just into this simple list of tasks, right?
That's right. And one of a previous guest was on. We were talking about the human condition of believing that it's like a force positive. I can never get it right. Even on the podcast, you said the word and can't remember exactly what they call it. But when they call it that, it sounds really good. But it's this idea that we can get more done. We in a day. We have this idea that we can achieve more, and it's just not the case. And so when we're thinking about this with checklists and standard operating procedures, it's really easy to think, well, I know this stuff really well, put a few notes down and somebody else will be able to follow those. And it's often not the case.
It's often not. And that's why it can be really useful to look to some outside support, look to somebody who knows probing questions to ask in operations individual, someone who has that project management mindset, because they can really be on the lookout for those moments where we need to dig a little deeper and ask a few more questions and pull that information out of the business owner's head, because they do, a lot of us business owners, we start by ourselves or just with one person with us. And so much is just happening in our head. We just really know the flow. And it gets to where you forget, like you don't know what you didn't know. And everything that's living in your head, we've got to get out of there. And I've seen too where those business owners are making a lot of assumptions and they think their team should know how to answer that email from a client or how to respond to that question about a receipt or whatever the situation may be. And they don't. And it's not because they're not qualified or because they're not a great team member. Just you have your own way of doing things. And we need to get that out of your head and document it and then supported by a proper project management tool so that your team can successfully support you and in the way that feels best to you and your business's standards.
So true. There's so much that goes into things, and especially in the bookkeeping industry, it's technical. It's technical business. There's certain things that need to be done a certain way. There's lots of different software. There's tax considerations. Doing it the right way is really the only way, and there's so many ways to do it. So that can really hang people up. Absolutely. And so when it comes to this project management, I mean, let's say one of our listeners was thinking about actually managing a project. This is your expertise. What are the key components of getting a project completed successfully?
So that will depend on a particular business. But what I like to do is I have a DISCO framework that I walk my agency owners and my business owners through. And what that is DISCO is an acronym, obviously. So D, we're going to define. So what you're going to do is you're going to define the workflow, because we can't refine it and make improvements until we actually know what it currently looks like. And that's every tiny little task along the process. And then I, we want to identify, we want to look for gaps, drop-offs, redundancies, anything in there where we see opportunities for a misstep or an opportunity for improvement. And then as we're going to streamline that workflow, we are going to make it feel efficient. We're going to create templates. We're going to create canned emails. We're going to, do whatever we can, organize files to make sure that this workflow can be flawlessly executed without someone spending a lot of time fumbling around. And then C, we're going to create phases and milestones. And this is a big piece of that project management tracking that you were talking about. Each individual business has their own workflow, and each of those workflows has their own key phases and milestones. This is typically certain moments where you are needing something from a client. You are maybe needing approval. There's maybe internal reviews, internal checkpoints, and you've landed on a milestone when work can't continue past that moment until something very specific happens. And it usually involves, again, like an approval, a sign-off, you're waiting on information. But those are your milestones, and those are the things you want to document. And then to bring it full circle, DISCO ends with an O. Now we can outsource and automate. Once we have this really nice workflow, it's streamlined, it's efficient. We know we've got those important milestones outlined. Now we can outsource and automate, and that's where a lot of time saving comes in.
So interesting. I'd love to hear if you have any, like the stories, the transformation, if you worked with business owners that were trying to get there and weren't able to do it. And then how did you help them and how did it go?
Yeah, a lot of the business owners I work with, and when we move through this system, they start saving a minimum of 5 hours per week. And what we've done is we've been able to cut down on a lot of email, a lot of back and forth. I'm thinking of one client in particular. She had a pretty extensive onboarding process. And what was interesting is if you asked her what her onboarding process was, she would have just said, hey, the proposal, the contract, the invoice, and we're good. But there was a lot more that was going on in those first few weeks of working with her clients. And what we found is onboarding actually lasted about 6 or 8 weeks for her because we needed to get information from the client. The team had to have an internal kickoff call. She created a lot of dashboards and KPIs for her clients. So she was working on that. And really, we spent about 6 or 8 weeks in this onboarding process. And then it went into ongoing management and a more maintenance type scenario. So what we did is instead of those 6 or 8 weeks feeling very put out the fire, like, oh, we actually need this login from the client. Let's go talk to them. Oh, yeah, now we need to do this. Well, I emailed them and I asked them to give me access to this and they didn't know how. So then we went back and forth over email a bunch of times. We created a series of questionnaires and it sounds really counterintuitive, but we added some phone calls to the onboarding process. And I think we ended up adding 2 phone calls and 2 forms, and it resulted in a savings of between 6 and 8 hours for that onboarding for every single client. And so you can imagine when you times that out by 5 clients, 10 clients, 15 clients, that's a massive amount of time saved.
It is. It's an upfront investment, but it's an annuity. It keeps on giving back once you've done the work and invested in actually setting up these things in your business.
Yes, it really should be considered an investment. A lot of ops work should be viewed that way. And in the moment, it can feel like, oh, I don't want to document this, or I don't want to, train the team on another tool, right? But the thing is when you're doing it effectively, you're using the right tools, you have the right workflows in place, these savings and time savings that is going to continue beyond that, it's just exponential. It's that snowball effect. Right? It's just going to grow and grow and grow. And then before you know it, you're just running like a well-oiled machine.
Mm. Let's talk a little bit about your business journey. You in the beginning, I was asking a little bit of this, but it's really, I'd love to know your thoughts as the business owner, the entrepreneur that started the business. What have been your obstacles in growing your business?
That's a great question. And, it would be easy for someone to think, oh, well, she's an ops person and she knows project management. It probably was just built with all these great tools and SOPs right out the gate. And that's not true. And that's partly because of, the nature of a business. Just like everybody else, when I first started, it was all about finding clients. And all about finding sales and all about trying the offer. And I was doing a lot of that. I was, finding my niche. I was finding the work I love to do best, the tools I love to work in best. I was learning a lot of different tools. And it was definitely a time-consuming journey, but one that was worthwhile. And then you get to a certain point, though, where things start clicking and you think, okay, I know the client, I remember okay, I know the client I'm going after. I know who really benefits from these services. I know what they want. I've got the service offering nailed down. And it's at that moment that it was okay, now it's time to start implementing some workflows. So some of the things I did early on that I think helped save me down the road was when I would send out a proposal to a client, I automatically was saving that. I would write an email as if I could use it over and over again the first time I wrote it. And then I would save it. And I would do the same thing with, the invoicing and any questionnaires I built. So for example, I see a lot of times when someone's sending out an email for a proposal, they're like, hey, it was so great talking to you this past Wednesday. I wanted to send over that proposal that we talked about, and they're adding in all these little kind of bespoke and custom phrases that actually don't need to be in there. You can pull those out and have a far more templated email. Now, we still obviously want to be friendly. We still want to be conversational, but have some good bones there. And that was something I did early on that really helped me down the road get some efficiency gains later when it was time to really implement some real workflows and some real project management tools in my own business.
That's nice. That's nice. I love hearing these stories. When it comes to mistakes, we often talk about the mistakes and how to avoid them. What do you think some of the big mistakes have been in your business journey?
I think waiting too long to hire was definitely a mistake that I made. As much as I had stuff and felt like I had a good workflow down, I think the training component always felt maybe a little scary to me, or I don't know, maybe even overwhelming. I think that part of it just felt heavy to me. And so because of that, I really waited way too long to start bringing on account managers or bringing people into that client facing role. And it was hard. There was definitely a lot of long days and working in the evenings or up early at the computer. And then, I got to that point where I thought, oh, okay, I need to hire somebody. But because I was already myself in a lot of overwhelm and had all of this work to do, I didn't do a proper job hiring either. And I ended up making a really bad hire. And so that was a really valuable lesson learned for me, that it's better to start looking ahead. And, that was one of those moments where I was feeling a little bit like, oh, Melissa, you should have known better. You get these workflows in place, you get these SOPs in place, you bring people on, you train them, you give them that space. It's stuff where you're like, oh, how did I know this for other people, but somehow it escaped me kind of moment, right? And so that was a hard lesson learned, but one I've since corrected, and now I took the time to put in a hiring process for myself and an onboarding process for agency authority, so that as account managers and team members do come on, I know I can feel good about that process and feel good about, the other side of that as well.
That's lovely. Lovely. Always great to hear about the mistake and then how you're overcoming it. And it sounds like you've done a great job of that. And especially around the hiring. Hiring can be very daunting. And I love that some of your own mistakes are the mistakes that you help other people with. It's people often shy away from sharing those things, but it's the absolute truth that every business owner makes mistakes in all areas of the business, even their own expertise. You make mistakes. So I love hearing that and reminding our listener that the mistakes aren't the bad thing. It's how you deal with them, and it's how you recover from them and ensure that you minimize the likelihood that they'll happen again.
Exactly. And then I try to leverage those too to better serve my own clients as I, look back on my journey and I think, I should have made that hire 6 months earlier. Okay, what did my business look like then? Let me be on the lookout now for my clients. And when I see that happening to them, let me help them, right? Let them learn from my mistake. And so I look back at those moments, or if I think, why didn't I automate this a year ago? Why am I still doing this manually? I go, okay, this is a process. I'm going to make a note of this. And then again, be on the lookout for those red flags for my clients. So I, for sure, definitely make mistakes in my business, even ones that you would think I shouldn't, right? But, you learn from them. And then I also just try to leverage those and make it so we can support our clients in an even bigger way.
That's right. Absolutely. A couple quotes ring true for me when I'm listening to you in this conversation. It was recently, don't know if I listened to it, but pretty sure I listened to it. It was Eckhart Tolle, and people can look him up. He's a philosopher, if you will. But he was saying that people think of failure as failure, but it's really life's greatest teacher is failure. And there really is no failure, because if you aren't failing at something, you're not learning, and you're pretty much not doing anything, because there can be no growth without some sort of breakdown of failure. And so it's like a reframe of failing and to go out and fail faster, because you get to the good stuff more quickly. And the other one is from a mentor of mine, Peter Cook, recently told me a story about a real struggle in his life, a challenge, a setback, if you will. And one of his mentors said to him, "It's not being done to you; it's being done for you." It's a complete reframe of the things that we go through, the mistakes that we make. they're being done for us because it's putting us into a new trajectory that's going to be better for us in our life. So this whole concept of, hey, why is this happening to me? It's, it's not fair, or whatever the case may be. It's like, actually, it's a win. It's like, it's going to create something new, a new learning, a new opportunity. It's going to open up a new door. And so, these things are big. You're growing your business. Our listeners growing their business. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be setbacks and challenges. It's how you frame it, think about it, and recover from it.
Yes, so good.
So, Melissa, this has been absolutely a fantastic conversation about project management and the operation side of the business. For those listeners that would love to get more information from you or learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, this is sounding a little too familiar, a little more familiar than I'd like, then hop over to youragencyauthority.com/call. You can book a time with me. We can talk it out. Or you can always find me on LinkedIn also. I love to hang out there. I'm in the DMs a lot, and that's just Melissa V. Morris, V as in victory. But check it out. There's some good stuff there too. A lot of good content on some steps towards automating, some steps towards streamlining, and a lot of just time-saving tips that I think would be really beneficial for anybody who's looking to get a handle on the back end of their business.
I absolutely love that. And we'll, of course, have all of those links and notes in our show notes. And Melissa, on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for your generosity in coming on the show and sharing your expertise with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
It's been our pleasure. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.